This is Juno, Kit Basher and Grimdark Painter Extraordinaire under the name of WARPPAINTER on Instagram and or YouTube. And this is the War Room, primarily a place for World War II aficionados and recreators to hang out and chat and sort of display their works in a museum. And secondarily, a place for tabletop gamers to play their war games from Bolt Action to Age of Sigmar to Warhammer 40k and what have you. And just a few years ago, they recently started a shop where they could sell not only paints but also Warhammer products. So if you're in the Greenhills area or in the Pasig area of the Philippines, check this place out. This is my favorite places to play Warhammer and hang out. Where is the focal point, man? But today, this place is a place for me and Juno to create some awesome terrain. In front of you is all the junk that me and Juno have collected over the years of the hobby. And we've all been there where we're about to throw something in the trash and we think to ourselves, this is an interesting shape that I could turn into a special project for the hobby one day. And today is that day. Plus, going green also makes you feel kind of good about being in a hobby that produces a lot of plastic and plastic waste. So things like these really make us really feel good about ourselves and in a way give back to the hobby, which I'll talk to a little bit later after the video. After laying down all the junk we've collected, the idea was to plan something based on what we were inspired by. Seeing all the different shapes and silhouettes of the junk we've collected together, we sort of deduced that we're going to make an entire terrain set, or as many terrain buildings as we can, and paint it up for that day. And the structure that we went by to guide us was that every piece of terrain needed to have a base or a foundation, which meant us using this foam core sheet as our max size of terrain pieces. So we will only bash together the amount of terrain pieces that will fit within that sheet of foam core board or foam. And it's at this stage where you want to consider dry fitting as your core skill or tool. Since speed is one of our priorities, we got to make sure what we want really fits and looks really well. And it's at that time we can decide to build on our structures or pieces of terrain. Where in this step, the hot glue gun becomes your best friend. And I say that because it's the only adhesive that we could use reliably that would get us a firm bond in the quickest amount of time. I actually had spent a lot of time considering the number of glue sticks I'd be bringing for that day, and I really underestimated the amount of glue that we'd be using. If you're doing a similar project but speed is not that much of a priority for you, you may want to consider wood glue or also stronger bonds such as super glue or other types of cement and even wall cement for a stronger connection, especially if this is going to be terrain pieces for play. Once we got our silhouettes for our structures ready and good to go, we use up a lot of time putting a lot of greeblies to these structures. Personally, I've collected a lot of interesting objects that I had no idea what to use for in our hobby until I saw the silhouettes that we've built, until I saw that I could use this piece or greebly to turn this structure to look like a corporate building or make it look like an engine or a generator or a giant factory of some sort. This sort of made me feel good because in a way I was unloading a lot of junk that was taking up my space, and I'm sure for Juno it was the same feeling as well. It's just nice to know that all of these things that we've been collecting together as hobby friends culminated into these several pieces of terrain. And as kit bashers, we sort of had way too much fun to the point that we only had around 2+ hours to blitz up and paint this structure, which is why we headed on to spray priming all these structures in black. Black because in case we missed the spot, at least it was covered black instead of white or gray, something that would stand out. Black is very safe and good primer for something you want with speed, not just with display painting. And just like the glue sticks, unfortunately, I also underestimated the amount of spray paint that I would need. And luckily for Juno, he brought a special secret sauce, which was quite interesting because it's a mixture of primer, his favorite brown color, and also texture paints, all in one mixture. And it was dry brushed or hand brushed onto the bare plastic or bare material, and at the same time in one coat you were base coating, priming, and also adding texture to your object, which is quite interesting, unique, and at least personally I've never heard before, and this might be something you might want to try. It was up to that point that we just had to go all out, blitz, and paint as fast as we could. The only primary thing we had to keep in mind was that we had to paint with playing in mind, and that meant that these paint jobs could not steal away from the beautiful armies that would be blasting and killing each other next to them. These terrain structures had to have a unique color palette, but still be a bit muted to give way to more bright popping colors such as primary colors of blue, reds, and yellows. So a lot of the color choices were always muted secondary or tertiary colors. While they added some points of interest, there was also a bit less pronounced as to how most models would be on the battlefield. That way, the terrain never competes with the paint job of the players on that table for that given time. And even with around 2 hours left to paint all these things, or even less, the reason why we considered a lot of these things in the paint scheme is because we have donated this terrain set to the future players of the War Room. This video is actually a documentation of an initiative that me and Juno want to try out. It's our trial to see how many pieces of terrain 2 hobbyists can make in a day. And if 2 hobbyists can make that in a day, it becomes our template to figure out how many hobbyists it takes to donate time for a local gaming store to have a fully painted set of terrain. And in launching this video, Juno has already started talking to some hobbyists and started rallying some people to donate their junk and do the same thing that we're doing now, only this time at a different local hobby game store. And I encourage you guys to try the same thing, especially for a lot of hobbyists here who have a small hobby space. There might not be a lot of space to store our terrain, whereas we still want to paint them. You could store them in your local gaming store and let other players use them and enjoy. And this is actually our way of giving back, not just in a sustainable way, but also in a hobby kind of way. To the future and current players of the War Room, I hope you've enjoyed using or will enjoy using the terrain we've left behind for you guys. Watch out for where Juno and I will go for where we can donate other pieces of terrain from the things that we will make. Primarily, this was a crazy fun project. I was personally going through quite the hobby slump myself, where I wasn't painting as much miniatures or display figures as I wanted, but I still kept painting random bits of terrain, random bits of easy projects, and one of these things was it. There was no guide, there was no strict rules. It was just us it was just us. It was just us mashing stuff together, having fun, no plan, just talking, and surprisingly enough, with the least amount of effort, we're still able to come out with some interesting shapes and figures that we can be personally happy about. It's not the best terrain out there, admittedly, but it's still something that I'm very proud to say I did with a friend in around 6 hours, and at the same time feel good about making sure those pieces of terrain that me and Juno loved making are going to be put to good use and enjoyed by other hobbyists. Plus, we really emptied out like the space here in the hobby area, because now I have more room to collect more junk and do it all over again. So I hope this encourages you to take a look at the junk you're throwing out, the space that you could be saving, and the local game stores that you could be contributing to in the future. Maybe you could do something in the future, or message me and let me know if you want to collaborate and do something for your gaming store. I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Louie of Louie Loves Minis, reminding you to hobby every day to keep the sprues away!